have another class today? Or is this, you did? Which class was that one? Java. Oh, okay. How's that going? Go on. Yeah. Go on. Yeah. What are you guys learning? Like what concepts right now? GUI stuff? Yeah, my first Java class back at Seneca, 2001. I don't remember a lot of it. I just remember doing like making these panels and trying to create a calendar. Yeah. And back then we had no Stack Overflow back then, right? So it's like you had to read the book, trying to look at the index, trying to look at what methods are available, like trying to come up with various ways to solve the problem. Okay, 1 o'clock. Here we go. Everyone's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. Okay, all right. So we'll start this one. Am I waiting for anyone? Am I waiting for anyone here? No? Okay, start. All right, so given this person object, how would you get the value of poker? I wish Gag and Deep was here. So. All right, so there's 2 possible answers. You could either do it this way, or if you want to use the array notation, just make sure you put the quotes in this one here. I tried to trick you with this one, but there's no quotes here. So this will not work. Nice, ace. Who's clown? There we go. So given this object, what code would fit inside this function of ... What line of code would return bow? So notice I said, how would I return? So last week I said there's a difference between console logging something and returning something. So in this case, I wanted the function to return something, which means you had to use the keyword return, which means all of these console logs has to be wrong. All right. But in terms of this name would be correct. So for those of you who chose this one right here, you were correct with that part, this name. It's just that I specifically asked for return. Okay. Because console log just outputs to the console, but return actually returns a value to whoever called it. Good. Yeah, so remember, if you console log like an array, but let's say you try to add that array to a string, it'll therefore call toString method on that array, which will give a comma separated list. But if you're trying to do the same kind of thing with any object, it'll just say object. So that's when you know you need to debug it further. Three possible answers. Who chose nothing? That are the 3 possible answers. Yeah. So remember, if you use the keyword new on a constructor function, and what is a constructor function? A constructor function is, you have a function, and inside that function, it'll say this dot name equals whatever. So the new keyword it's as if it'll create the first line of code inside that function will be like, it'll create an empty object, like a squiggly bracket, and it'll assign that to the keyword this. So this equals empty object, and then you could do your this.name, and then at the end of that bottom of that function, it'll return this essentially. So there's 3 answers here. All right, who's Apple Dance? Okay, last one, here we go. So given this object, what code goes there if you want to push Bob to the end of the array list? Yeah, right. So you have to first say this.list to refer to the object's list array, and you also have to say this.name. All right, Ace, Suk, and Connor, come and get your free sticker. No. Let's see here. So just to reiterate that last Kahoot question, actually the second last one about the new, let me just demonstrate something really quick, which I wanted to say last week. So let's create a constructor function. So if I said a function, my function, and in here I say this.name equals Bob, whatever. Okay. With normal functions, you would normally say, my func and parentheses to run it. But if I do that now, nothing supposedly happens because, we didn't really do anything here. Now, I should say this. We did do something here. This is what I want to say. Remember the rules for what the question I have is, what is this inside this context of just a regular function like that? What is this referring to? Window. So you would expect this value to be where? Inside window.name. And let's test that. So if I say window.name, there it is. I did want to say that. So that's if I just run it. But you normally never want to do that. You normally want to say the keyword new, which again creates an empty object inside here. So it's as if it creates an empty object right here, right? And then assigns this to it. So this equals empty object. You do your property changes, and then at the bottom of this function, it'll return this. And that's why if I say new my func, notice this bracket here, it's telling this is a return value, and it's returning this. All right, so that's what I want to say. Quick announcements. Some of you may be on track to be over 100% for your final grade. Just be aware that the maximum mark I can ever give you, or any teacher can ever give you here, is 100. So if you're like over 100, I'm going to put 100 on because I'm only given a drop-down menu to put marks. I'm not given a text box. So I wanted to say this. When you create a form in any HTML form, the danger, and this is dealing with security, the danger is something called cross-site scripting attacks. And this is not a security course, and I'm not an expert on it. But I just wanted to mention this webpage on how to make sure that the input that you're accepting from your users is sanitized and safe. And this is a quick demo of why it's dangerous to just leave a text box empty without any kind of check on that. So he suggests using sanitizing your HTML by using this library, Purify, and then you could make sure that any text that's entered inside the input box won't be nasty, potentially. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that offhand. And I think I provided that link somewhere. Provide that link anywhere? Provide that link anywhere? No, I didn't. Okay, I'll put it here under additional resources. That's that. Okay. The next thing I want to say, I know last week I said I was going to introduce reduce, the dot reduce method for you this week. I'm going to leave that till next week. So next week, remember how next week was supposed to be your presentation week on ES6, and all of you said, no, we don't like presentation. So basically next week is like, I have to create more content to teach. So it'll be like, I'm going to teach you ES6. Okay. All of the stuff you need to know for ES6. Remember last week I showed you like interview questions that my former student got? We're going to go through those. Make sure you're prepared. And some more for next week. Another quick little thing I wanted to mention is this. Let's say you have an array of objects. Okay, I'm just going to quickly grab an array of objects. This is a cool site. If you ever need like dummy JSON data, real quick, you can go to this site called mockaroo.com. And you can actually generate your own kinds of fields. Like, for example, if you need like an avatar, you click on that. If you need like a car model, you know, you got all kinds of different things here. And then when you click on, let's say I just need 3 rows, and it's going to give me 3. I don't want a CSV file. I just want a JSON file. So then let me say preview. So there, it quickly generated some data. So here's what I wanted to say. Let's say you're in a situation where you want to see the contents of your data. Okay. In the past, I would maybe, I just said let A equals what I just copied. Okay, so now A is my data. So in the past, in the classes, I would usually say, you know, console log A to see what's in A. And I'd click on the arrow thing to see what's in there. Tip, you can do this, console.table. Nice, right? That's a cool tip. Okay, so let us go to, okay, everyone on the browser. So let's close out. I'm going to ask you a few questions. So today's class is on JSON, stuff you kind of know already. I'm just going to go in a little bit deeper on that. So everyone on your browser, go here, api.github.com/users, and make sure there's an S after user, / and then your username that you would normally use for your GitHub, and then see what happens. So you get something that looks like this. Question I have, and I just told you the answer. What kind of data structure is this? Which all of you should know. It's JSON, which stands for what? Yes, JavaScript Object Notation. Question, if you look at my screen or your screen in front of you, on the right-hand side, basically the values, what kind of fundamental data types exists besides strings? So I guess the question I have for you is, what kind of fundamental data types does JSON accept? So on the right-hand side, we have a string. How about this one? What is this? A number. What else do you see when you go through this list? Boolean, yeah. Okay. No. Okay. By the way, JSON can accept arrays, and JSON can accept other objects, so nested objects. There's one thing it can't accept. I don't know, and I said this earlier on. I don't know if anyone remembers. Okay, we'll get to that. Keep that in mind. So if I simply copy and paste this JSON data and assign it to a variable like, you know, A equals paste. Question is, will this work? If I just say A, answer, yes, it works. Right? I didn't have to massage the data. Now, granted, I just copied and pasted manually with my physical hand. Now I could have fetched it programmatically, but in terms of like massaging the data that I got to make sure it's a right object, right looking object, I didn't have to do any of that. Also notice, you examine the left-hand side of this JSON data using quotes. When we create objects, did we have to use quotes? No, right? When in the console, whenever I created an object like const person, I just said on the left-hand side something without quotes. But if I had used quotes, it still would have worked. Okay? What I'm trying to get at is there is a difference between JSON and JavaScript objects that we normally use. And I'm trying to get you to realize there is a difference. And that's why I'm asking all these questions. Question. Does anyone know, before JSON was made popular, does anyone know the previous popular format, the name of it, for transferring data like this? Yes, XML. I'm going to show you an example of what XML looks like for those of you who may not know. So I'm just going to Google under images.google. I'm going to say like XML exchange data sample. So that's what XML looks like. What does that look like to you? Looks like HTML, right? HTML is a subset of XML. Okay, but the question I have for you is, if I simply copied and pasted this whole thing and tried to assign it to a JavaScript variable, would it work? No. How would I make it work? I'd have to probably code something myself or get some other JavaScript library to parse through it to make sure it eliminates these brackets like last name, but saves, the last name as a key and then saves this as a value, but just forget about this, but make sure it's valid. It's crazy. So why do you think JSON beat XML in terms of popularity? Yeah, so in terms of creation, in terms of receiving it, parsing it, it takes more time, more coding, that's why JSON beat XML, because XML, first of all, with all of these different tags, you're increasing the file size for each little property. So you don't want to increase file size over the network. So you want the fastest thing as possible. That's why JSON beat XML. That's why you don't really see XML a lot these days. But I just wanted to make that knowledge available that XML used to be the standard, but now it's JSON because it's faster parsing, smaller file size, which all leads to quicker performance. Question. Let's go back to JSON. Can other languages besides JavaScript, do you think they can make use of this JSON format? What do you think? Is JSON, another way of asking this is JSON only for JavaScript, or can it be used for other languages? What do you think? I heard something. Yeah.
It definitely can be. I use it for one of my jobs right now.
There you go. JSON is independent of JavaScript, and that's why JSON is used for pretty much every language when you're, trying to push data over the web. Okay. All right. So here's an example where we got some JSON data. I simply copied it from there and pasted it in my thing, in my JavaScript console, and it worked. Question I have is, does it work the other way? So here's where I'm getting at. And this leads to my other question that I'll ask you to think about. If I say const person, add some things here, name, age, whatever, and some kind of function. Oops. Oh. Thank you. It's a person there. Okay, so here, anyways, here is my object, right? From this squiggly bracket to this squiggly bracket. Question is this valid JSON? Can I go the other way? Can I copy this and maybe go to some kind of JSON validator out in the web somewhere and see if it's valid? Show of hands, who thinks this is valid JSON? Show of hands, who thinks this is not valid JSON? Okay. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. there's a validator, JSON validator here. And it says here, add your JSON here to validate. So you basically type in your JSON, what you think is good JSON. Click on this button to see if you're right. So I'm going to type in or paste in my object, what I think is valid JSON. Oh, error. Parse error on line 1. Oh, it disappeared already. So parse error on line 1. It doesn't like this N. See, can I magnify this? Yes. Doesn't like this N. This goes back to my question. What is the difference between JSON and regular JavaScript objects? Okay, yes, that's the answer to my other question. So JSON does not accept functions. Okay. So if it did, it would be very insecure. Data that you're receiving. So the rule number 1 is always use double quotes when you're giving. So if you're ever in a situation where you're making JSON, but you're hand making JSON, you always have to have double quotes here. So this name is not working because it wants double quotes. That means if I click on the next one, I should anticipate it not liking this A for age. There, see the arrow for A for age? So if I try to solve that problem, this 34 should be okay because I said number is okay. See, it does not like this greet function. Okay, so that's one way to check if it's valid JSON is going through some kind of validator. By the way, as an aside, if you ever need to handcraft your own JSON and put it somewhere, so you can, for testing purposes, you can fetch your own data. This is a cool website. You can create your own account, jsonbin.io, sign up for it. You can put your JSON here, and then the cool thing is you can actually have your own API. It'll give you a URL which you can fetch from, and it'll get you your own data, which we'll see in a second. Another way, go back to here for a second. Another way is you can say something like this, JSON.stringify, and then inside here, the brackets, you put in any object. So I already have my person object here. Let's see what happens when I run it through this JSON stringify method. It's called stringification. There it is. Notice how it wrapped everything, all the keys and values in double quotes. Left a 34. But notice, where's the function? Where's the greet function? Not there. So whenever you're trying to pass JSON data through the web, it's not going to accept any kind of function. Now, once we do get JSON data, we can do the opposite. So what I just did was I stringified this person object. Give me this. But if I take this and do the reverse through JSON.parse, I should be. Oh, hold on. There's too many quotes there. I don't think that'll work. I never tried this. Let me see. Yeah, because I did the fetch command. Remember how before? Okay, forget this. Remember how before when I said I fetched some JSON data from this website? Remember that? And it gave me a whole bunch of data like this. And then do you remember the command I said in the fetch where I had some kind of URL here, and I said .then, and I had response, and then I said this, response.json. I had to do that .json method because it turns the string that I received from the internet into a workable object that I can now use in JavaScript. Okay. And one way I could have also said JSON.parse if I ever receive a string, a long string. I could have also said that. So keep that in mind. Yeah, so if you ever have to send an object across the network, you must convert it to a string, and that's called stringification, and you do that through JSON.stringify in JavaScript. Okay, so let us go into this week's lesson files here. So let me download this. You can follow along, or you can download it yourself, or whatever you want to do. 1073 9 is that. Okay, so there's my thing. Oops. Code open. Okay. Whew, huge. All right, so this is the lab that Scott McCrindle gave us that I'm using. I'm not going to go through all of from step 9 onwards. I'm going to skip that for today's class because I think I consider you all experts now to enter HTML something to the web page, where you can output something from the JSON into the web page. So we're just gonna focus on just JSON stuff today. So that's steps 1 through 8. Let me see here. What else did I want to say? Okay. Build a header section. No, I didn't want that. Yes, I wanted that. Okay. I'm going to skip this step here where it says build a header section. All that, the original code that McCrindle did was he just said like, const header equals document query selector header section, because he's eventually going to there. Again, we're not going to output anything. We're just going to focus on the JSON part. Okay. I'm going to give you a history lesson. I'm going to show you like a million different ways to do the same thing. I'm basically showing you the fetch thing. In the past, it's called ajax. Does anyone know what the acronym ajax stands for? I don't know what it stands for. Ajax acronym. Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Okay, so this was what it used to be called when you needed to fetch something in the background. And this was the technology involved for the first time I ever saw Maps Google. I was amazed how they could scroll like this, right? Because up to that point in time in my internet experience, I've never seen anything that can scroll like this. Usually, as soon as you click the page, it refreshes, it reloads, and then you see the new view. I had no idea how they did this. Turns out that you were using Ajax, the needed content. So what I'm going to show you today is the old way of how to fetch JSON data. And I'm going to eventually give you 4 or 5 different ways to do the same thing of fetching. It's like a history lesson. This is how we used to do it. This isn't how we used to do it as well. This is how we now do it. This is a better way how we do it. That's it. This is the best way how we do it. That's what I'm going to show you, a million different ways to do the same thing, okay? So let's get a URL. So I want to store some JSON data in somewhere, and I think Scott gave us this JSON data here. I'm going to show you the JSON bin website that I just showed you a second ago. How we can get it from there. So let's go in here. I'll show you how easy it is. Let me log in. My GitHub. While it's thinking. Yes. How do I? Oh, create new. So I'll paste in my supplied JSON that Scott gave us, right? And then I just say create. Oh, let's make it a public bin. There we go. Create. Now I'm given this. Ta-da! URL. I can now go to this URL to get my JSON. Let's test that out. So I'm going to open up a new tab. I'm going to paste in my new URL. I should see JSON data being returned. Ta-da! Easy. I'll use that URL. Don't need that anymore. Oh, sorry. Can I show again? Oh, okay. By the way, to get the tabs that I previously erased, I say Control-Shift-T, and that'll give me the tabs that I erased. Right. So I basically created a new JSON thing, pasted it in, clicked. There's a button here called Create, and then it gave me this URL. Then as soon as I get URL, that means I can now go to that URL. If I get request on that URL, get the JSON data that I just pasted. So I don't need this anymore. So I'm going to do step 3, store the URL of the JSON file in a variable. So I'm just going to say, const request URL equals the string. I'm going to use that URL to get my JSON data in a second. So create a new XHR object. So this is traditionally how we've done it in the past. Get JSON data. He said something like this. Const request equals new XML HTTP request. And the only reason why I'm showing you this is because you might see this in the wild when you're working. So you need to know this, right? And then, now before I move on, notice it's using the keyword new. Mind. That means that this must be some kind of what? What's that called? What kind of constructor? And inside that constructor function, there must be like a this dot something equals something. That's what we're going to set now, kind of thing. So request dot open, and we're going to pass it some of this stuff. We're going to pass it what kind of request is it, which is a GET request, as opposed to a POST or something else. We're going to pass in the URL. Okay. Question: do you think this line actually establishes a connection, like actually does something yet? Yes or no? Who thinks yes? Who thinks no? You will be correct. The answer is no. Okay, we're just passing in, like this is like a function, right? That has 2 parameters. We're passing in 2 arguments here. And remember how I said the keyword new? So we're basically setting this dot something equals get this dot something equals the URL. We haven't done anything yet. We haven't actually done a network connection yet. We're just setting the properties. Request dot response type equals JSON. If I did not say this, if I remove this line, the kind of request, I would still get a request back, but it wouldn't be in the usable form that I could now use it as JavaScript. It would just give me like a string, but then I'd have to JSON.parse that string in order to make it usable. So by saying this JSON, it'll do that work for me behind the scenes, so it's usable. And then step 7 here is request.send. So this line here, request.send, that is the line that now establishes a connection on the internet and does something. That's when it's going to go through the wire to this computer called API JSON bin and request something. Okay. Now we still have to do step 8 because just because it sends a request, we have no way to handle the response yet. So this is one way on how to handle the response. We say request.add event listener. And before, we would do like click, but here we can say load. So once this is basically saying is once we get the response from the other computer through the internet to our local computer, then as soon as that happens, the browser will fire off a load event, and it's up to us to listen for that event. So that's why we're saying add event listener. We're now listening for that event, so now we can do something when that happens. What do we want to do? We want to do, we'll just display it, console log it. But first, I'll just say const ice cream equals request. From this request, this is how to access the response. So this should contain the JSON data. We're just assigning it to a variable, and now we're going to console log that variable. So if I run this and refresh the browser and look in the console, I should see the result of this console log here. Let's go to the browser. Let's refresh. Let's go in the console. Let's see if it worked. Open this object. I anticipate the same JSON that I pasted before, and it is. Cool. That is one way how to do it. That is the old way. Let me show you another old way, which is also very common. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shuffle around these little comments here, just more eye-friendly. Me for you. I kind of group them all together. There you go. So I'm going to do the same exact thing from steps 3 to 8 another way. And then I'm going to show you the modern way. And I'm going to show you the modern way. So, and then I'm going to show you the best way. Here's another way to do the same thing. Again, using XML HTTP requests. And actually, my teacher, I don't know if you know this, but I actually attended Georgian here as a student, 2015, 2016. I wasn't in the same program you guys were. I was in the certificate program for the one for web certificate. And I had, in my Comp 1073 class, which is what you're taking now, the teacher showed us this one. We kind of start off the same way. I'll just say the request URL. So have the same thing. Now here's where it differs though. Request.add event listener. The state we're listening for is called ready state change. Ooh, what's that? The reason why I'm showing you this is also a very common way to see something in the wild. So what we're doing is we're going to wait for the file to finish loading. And the way we're going to do that is through this if statement, this weird if statement called if request.readystate equals 4 and if request.status equals 200. And you can do something. So let me finish this off. So the rest of this is the same thing as I just did before. Request.response, and I'll console log. So what's happening here for this if statement? Oh, I have to say request. What happens is as soon as you say request.send, all of these events fire in the browser called ready state change. So it starts from a ready state of 0. Okay, so as soon as you say send, it'll eventually change from ready state 0 to ready state 1 to ready state 2, ready state 3, ready state 4. And each time it fires that event, we're listening for that. So each time it changes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're listening for that, and we're going to run this function if it matches our condition. But the thing is, 4 represents basically the state that we want to now, that we are now ready to receive the data. Because if it's 3 or 2 or 1, like it's not going to work. It has to be 4. And then this 200 number should be familiar to you. What does that represent in the HTTP world? Like you're all familiar with 404. You get a 404 error. That's an HTTP code when you get what? A missing page. What's the 200 status in HTTP? What does that represent? Look at some web page out under the network. Is it the network? There we go. Woo. So I just refreshed, and you see under status, whoops, let's do it again. Column here, 200, 200, 200. So I went to google.com, status 200. What does that represent? It found the web page. 200 represents OK. You got what you're looking for, right? So apparently, Google, in this web page, Google was asking for a ping image. You got that. It's OK. I gave you that. So now your browser has it. I gave that to you. right? Because we're always getting these different things. That's why it's called a GET request. So anyways, so that's why we have a 200 here, because we're waiting for that status of OK. Then we can do this. So let me comment out my first example. I need that one there. Oops. Leave this one here so I can use it here. And let me run this. It should be the same thing except for one little thing. Oh, OK, hold on. Back up. Yeah, before I run this, I wanted to experiment with this. As I was doing this, typing this up the other day, I said, OK, let's try this. Remember how I said, what if we don't do this? This line? Let's not do that line and see what happens, OK? Well, let's refresh. So this is the first example. Refresh. It looks kind of different. Doesn't look like what we're used to. Why is that? Because if I say, what type of data type are you giving me? String. It's not a usable object. But now if I uncomment this and refresh, object now, it's usable. That's why we say that line. So now I'm going to comment this now out. Now we're going here, do the second old method. We're going to run this, but notice there's nowhere in this code where I said the type is JSON. So let's see what happens if I console log this. Console. So comparing it to what we had before, this has to be like one giant string. So if I want to parse it into a usable object format, that's when I can say JSON. If I refresh now, it should no longer be the giant string. It's now the object, the binary data that the browser can use. Okay. So those are the two old ways how to do that. I'm going to show you or re-show you what I've used before, which is the fetch. Okay, so this is stuff you already seen before. URL. And I did say in the past that I'm going to talk about this .then. Now's the time. Well, not to its fullest extent. So the first then is I get some kind of response back, right? But that response is one giant string. I need to parse it. I suppose I could say JSON.parse here, and I think that would work. Although the standard is just say res.json. And once that happens, I get the actual data, the actual object I want, from which I can then do something. And you've all seen this before. Let's just see it again. Let me just comment. Yeah, I commented it on everything else. So this should also work. There it is. Okay. Curious. This is my own curiosity. I haven't tried this before. I'm going to try not using the .json. I'm going to say json.parse. I just want to if I'm right. If I get the same exact thing. Oh, hold on. Position 1. Okay, so I don't get. So that's why I don't use json.parse in there. So in this fetch, you have to use tells me. Now I'm curious. Okay, this is off script. I want to comment this out. I want to just console log the response. What am I getting? What kind of data is that? I'm getting a response data type. It's not just one string. I'm getting a response, and that's why in the proto it probably has the JSON method. There it is, JSON. So that's why it's not JSON parse. Okay, because it's not simply a string. So I was wrong. Forget what I said when I said this response is simply one entire string. It's not. It's a response object, and that's why I have to say response. I hope that when you're experimenting with new languages and technologies that you're coming up with curious questions on your own and you're just experimenting on your own to see. That's how you learn, right? Okay, so this is the modern way on how to do it. I'm going to show you the modern best way of how to do this. But I have to preface this with something. So this is a side topic. So in the past, if we had like some kind of myArray, like myArray, I want to talk about callback functions for a second. So for each whatever element, and then we do something with that element. So JavaScript is asynchronous language, which means that we're always going to have these callback functions. That's just the nature of the language of being asynchronous. However, there's a downside to this style of coding in terms of readability from a human perspective. Anyone here, show of hands, who's heard of something called callback from hell? Or callback hell? Let's Google images, Google callback hell in JavaScript. This is one example of callback hell. Let's try another example. I'm not. Let's see. Callback hell JavaScript. Let's see here. What else is good here? What's this one? This one looks interesting. Yeah. So notice how all of these functions are inside other functions, which is inside another function. So this is what's known as callback hell because this style of programming where you have callback functions, that could lead to a style of unreadability that looks like this, where one function is dependent on another function to finish, which is dependent on another function to finish. And this is called callback hell. And that's why something called promises were invented. Well, I'm just going to quickly introduce promises. I'm not going to explain it. It's a little bit techy. But promises is a new ES6 thing that gets rid of callbacks entirely. Okay, so let me see if there was a So instead of having a callback function like that, where a function is inside a parameter of another function, forget that. Promises deal away with that, and now you have the .then. So the promises, which allows you to use .then, is basically a solution to the callback hell problem. So when you see .then, think promises, think, oh, they're trying to solve the callback hell problem, so I don't ever have to see that tree if it ever comes down to it. So basically, this .then is a callback function. Just look. However, there is such thing as a promise hell, callback hell as well. So they invented a new thing, and this is what I haven't shown you yet. Before I show you it, I'm going to take you back to Comp 1006, which is PHP, for a second. You've probably seen. Let's see here. Week 9. You've probably seen stuff like this. So think back to your PHP class, specifically this line here. So what does that line do? It's preparing a string, preparing to insert data into where? Into MySQL database, for example, right? This line here, it does something with this string, right? Obviously, it says prepare this string. And then we execute it, right? So this is, what I'm trying to get at is PHP is synchronous, right? When you read this line of code line by line, you understand that each line finishes first before the next line does something. Whereas in JavaScript, it's not like that. It's asynchronous. Here is the modern way of all this callback stuff, nonsense, called async await. Async functions. Okay, so this is how it works. We're kind of using it. You're still using fetch, but what I want you to notice is the style of coding I'm about to type looks synchronous. It looks like PHP now, which is great for our mind because we don't have to think asynchronous anymore. But under the hood, it's still asynchronous. That's the whole point of this. Here's how it goes. So I'm going to say function. I'm going to call it, you can call it anything you want. Now here's the thing. If you're going to use an async await, you have to say async here, or the keyword function. Now we can fetch. However, we'll do the request URL as before. However, we're going to put a keyword called await here. That's it. Okay? Because what's happening is it's going to fetch the data like before, but unlike this line of .then where we're waiting for it to happen and then we do, like this looks synchronous. This is what our mind is used to, and we like that. Right? So then from here, you could say const data equals res.json, right? But again, this line is dependent on this line, so we have to say await here. Otherwise, it won't work. And now we can console log that data. Let's see if that works. Oh, I have to call it. I have to say get JSON. All right, refresh. I should see the same thing. And we do. This is now the best, most recommended way to fetch something using fetch within an async await kind of function. Because the readability looks synchronous, and we like that readability style. Under the hood, it's still asynchronous. Okay, what time is it? 1:51. Finally, I'm just going to mention, and I'm going to demonstrate one more thing to do the same thing that some people gravitate to, even though the fetch and async await is out there. They gravitate toward this library called Axios. So you may hear of Axios in the future. It's just a library that you download. And you basically use it, you include the script tag, but it looks like this. So axios.get, put in your URL, and then you say .then, and then now you already have the workable object response. You don't have to JSON parse it. It's already usable. And that's why some people like it, because with fetch, you still have to use .json, res.json, whereas here you don't have to. It's already usable. And again, it's still using the .then, so whatever. You can still use this with async await, whatever. So I'm just going to mention that offhand. I'm not going to demonstrate it. But that's all I want to say for that. Okay, so we're done with this thing. Before we get into the next thing, oh, let me just see my notes for a second. Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. This whole concept of having a URL that allows us to get data, what is that called? Yes, it's Ajax, but it's also called REST API. You've probably heard of that, REST API. Yes? So that's what this is. The API is some kind of URL at the top that allows us, where if you go to it, right, just like our JSON bin one, which I lost already, that's a REST API. So when you go to that URL, you get stuff. However, within the past 3-4 years, something new has developed. Because even with REST APIs, there's shortcomings. So I'm going to mention this offhand. I'm not going to teach it, but this is something you should definitely be aware of because it's up and coming. It's new. It's hot. What are the downsides if you were to create an Amazon web page that has the person's account, they're logged in, they have a shopping cart, and they're looking at a product, and they're trying to add product. Like, the question I have is, how many REST APIs do you think you would have to get and coordinate with in order to make that web page happen? What do you think? A lot. Okay, you probably have to get an API to get the customer data, API to get the product data, API to get, I don't know, whatever, like pictures of certain products. I don't know, variation. There's different variations. And so what's happening is there has been some kind of developer fatigue where like, I have to go to this API to get just the right, and that's basically asking another programming team to even create that API just for you, right? So the problem now is some web pages have too many fetches in one page. There's too many REST APIs that people have to make, that people have to fetch, that it becomes burdensome. So this is a solution to that. I don't know how to do this, but this is the new hotness. GraphQL. Okay. So GraphQL, all you have to specify is you have to describe, you have to ask for what you want in JSON looking kind of format. And then you get exactly what you asked for. You no longer have to wrestle with multiple REST APIs. You just ask what you want and you get it back. So what happens is GraphQL works with a server in the back end, and that server does all the shuffling and handling of all the multiple REST APIs. But this is the new hotness, and I have yet to learn this. I'll just mention that offhand. Okay, before we take a break, I'm going to show you one thing. So everyone on the browser, okay, so any questions before I move on to a different topic entirely? Any questions or comments? So I hope I gave you some kind of like in-depth view of JSON. So far we've been getting JSON from APIs. Let's work with JSON that's coming from the browser itself. So this is what I want you to do. Open up your browser, open up your console to any web page. And I'm going to show you a quick way on how to get your latitude and longitude right now in your browser. So type this in your browser. Type in navigator.geolocation.getCurrentPosition. Now inside the parentheses, we're going to put data. So this is a function, and we're just going to console log the data. Press enter, see what you get. Oh. Now you should see this prompt. Say allow. There. You should get this. Get some JSON or some JavaScript object back. It should tell you your latitude and your longitude. Cool. Show of hands, who's got that? Yeah? Okay, cool. Before we go to the break and move to the other classroom, here is your challenge. And you will get 1 sticker plus 1 bonus mark added to your Lab 9 if you can show me this before the break ends. So Google, they give you a way to programmatically draw a Google map. So this is, if you copy this right now, and try it using your API, which is another story. You have to get your own API key. This should display, does it show here an example? Okay, it doesn't show an example, but this should display a Google map that is centered on the latitude and longitude that you give it. Okay. So in my announcements earlier, I said get your own API key. So the way to do that is go to Cloud Developer. Let's Google Cloud Developer Google. Okay. And And you may need to create a new project. So notice up here, you have to, there's a drop-down menu. You may need to create your own project, but once you do, let me go through the whole thing. So I'm going to create a new project. I'll say comp 1073, Google Map, whatever. Create, and I should get an API back. Here, maybe go to APIs overview, maybe. We'll see. Go to APIs overview. There, credentials. I want to see the credentials. Credentials. There. This is what you were copying. This is your key. So you copy and paste this key, substitute it in for this, substitute it for this line of code right here. So if you were to copy and paste this line of code, it should work. The only thing I forgot to mention is I think you still have to enable something in the, shoot, let me see. Here, there's an enable APIs. If you still have to click enable APIs and enable this Maps JavaScript API to make that key work for you, I think is what you need to do. So you click on Maps JavaScript API, click enable. This normally would say enable. Click that. So now your API is enabled, and now this should work for you. Okay, so let's take a 20 to 25 minute break while we're going to the other class. So basically, if you can use what I taught you about getting this geolocation get current position to get your latitude, longitude, hopefully you can figure out a way to substitute that latitude and longitude inside this code right here that Google gave you, so that when it runs, it'll center the map where you are right now. Yeah? So that's your challenge. See you in the other class. I'll take it up after if you don't figure it out. Okay, you made it private, make it public, so you don't have to deal with that. Go back to your edit bin. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Oh, that's interesting. Wait, did you log in? Yeah, that's you, right? Okay. Huh. Usually there was like a thing here that would make you. Okay, we'll try it again. Copy this and we'll create a new JSON. Okay, paste that in. Okay, make sure that's public. There, now create. There. So you'll never have. So you should never. There. Try that. That should be okay. Did you miss? Oh, wait, you copied it. Yeah. There's also a copy button there. That should work also. Yeah. Now the reason why it's showing this way and not like my way is because you probably is this Chrome? You can install an extension in Chrome that will make this look nice. Oh. Yeah. So like try it. Try going here. Where's your extensions? Or how do you get to extension? Actually, open a new tab. Say type in Chrome : / extensions. : / extensions. Yeah. And then search for JSON, something with JSON. Oh, maybe not. Okay, hold on. Maybe this. Oh, maybe this one. Maybe. Okay, so yeah, search for JSON there. Oh yeah, JSON viewer, just like that one. Yeah. There, and install the most popular one, which is I think is that one. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I think it's there. Okay, so let me refresh now. Ah, looks good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Where's the page you opened? Like we had this one.
Oh, I just I Googled Google Maps JavaScript API, I think. Yeah, so I said JavaScript Maps API, and it gave me this overview page, and it looks like that. Yeah?
I was just trying this, so
What's your name again?
Rami.
Yes. Okay.
So it's just showing me this.
Navigator.
Navigate.
Yeah, navigate versus, it's not navigate, I think it was navigator. Yeah, see? Navigator.
Okay.
It's just a misspelling.
Sure.
Yeah.
But even if I do like SW registered after that, it shows syntax error.
I'm not sure what the SW registered means. I think it's referring to the Google page. It's not us.
Okay.
Yeah.